Operation is still ongoing. There are 16 identified bodies. Of those 82, 16 have been identified. As we heard, many body parts. That number of casualties will be rising probably as the rescue operation will continue. Mayor Giuliani requested to the Federal Emergency Management Agency 6,000 body bags. Meanwhile, the entire area south of 14th Street in Lower Manhattan remains sealed off. Several blocks of Lower Manhattan remain also without electricity. That is why many of the people living, especially the elderly people living in the buildings here, have been evacuated. Some of the people decided to leave on their own. But we also met several local Lower Manhattans, if you want. People who live here all their life. They said, we're not going to leave on a day like this. Back to you, Garrick.
Thank you very much. Alessio Vinci there on the scene. We'll be coming back to you through the early morning hours here in the East Coast for your update reports. One little footnote as to an incident which occurred just a few minutes ago before we went to Alessio. There was a strange and unfamiliar sound in the skies over Manhattan. Obviously, for a couple of days now, there have been no signs of airplanes because the airports have been closed down, and Manhattan is an approachway to LaGuardia Airport. But about 3 a.m., or 3:05 a.m., we suddenly heard the sound of a fighter plane, and then a second fighter plane roaring over the heart of Manhattan here in New York City. What were two fighter planes doing, roaring with their afterburners on it, appeared to our ears, waking people out of their sleep? No idea, but that's what they were doing. Strange things happen in Manhattan in the middle of the night. Back to you now in Atlanta.
Garrick, thank you.
Investigators have spread up and down the East Coast in an exhaustive effort to identify those responsible for Tuesday's attacks. Mike Betcher reports now on the leads and what they reveal about the attacks.
From Maine to Florida, the investigation moved quickly along the eastern seaboard.
We have, in the last 24 hours, taken the manifests and used those as an evidentiary base, and have talked to many of the families of the victims, and have successfully, I believe, identified many of the hijackers on each of the 4 flights that went down.
Federal investigators now believe they know the identity of 4 men capable of piloting the 2 planes that left Boston and crashed into the World Trade Center. The key, rental cars parked by the suspected terrorist at Portland International Airport and Boston's Logan Airport, each yielding clues that ultimately led investigators to flight schools in Florida.
A number of the suspected hijackers were trained as pilots in the United States.
Rental records for the car left in Portland brought investigators to residences in Vero Beach, Florida, which were searched by the FBI. Inside one house, pictures of Adnan Bukhari and a pilot certificate from a Florida flight school in his name. Also found inside the residence, another pilot certificate for Amir Abbas Bukhari. Another certificate indicates that at least one of the Bukharis participated in a program to help train Saudi Airlines employees. Federal investigators believe the 2 men are brothers and prime suspects. FBI agents also visited other Florida locations after gathering clues from the second rental car parked at Boston's Logan Airport that led to the identity of 2 more men, also pilots, Mohammed Atta and Marwan Youssef Al-Shehi, who received at least some flight training at Huffman Aviation in Venice, Florida. Charles Voss is a bookkeeper at Huffman Aviation who briefly allowed the 2 men to stay at his house.
They were, like I said, students, and they arrived over there a year ago. It was in last July. And when they first arrived, they had no place to stay. They just popped in pretty much, as I recall, unannounced. And so we provided them, for the benefit of the flight school, provided them a place to stay for a few days.
At least one person believed to be an acquaintance of the Bukharis has been taken into custody for questioning.
There have been occasions where we have interviewed individuals and come to find that the individual is out of status, and that individual has been detained on an immigration hold. But there have been no arrests relating to these hijackings at this point.
Having found the 4 men, federal investigators believe piloted the 2 hijacked jets into the World Trade Center towers. They are now scouring Florida flight schools, searching for the pilots of the other 2 jetliners, one that crashed in Pennsylvania, the other that rammed the Pentagon. Mike Betcher, CNN, Atlanta.
We have a dramatic glimpse into some of the terror during the hijacking of one flight. CNN has obtained a partial copy of cockpit transcripts as heard by air traffic controllers. Here's Justice Department correspondent Kelly Arena.
Sometime before United Airlines Flight 93 went down in Pennsylvania, a microphone in the cockpit was left open. Air traffic controllers heard shouting, someone yelling, "Get out of here!" The microphone is momentarily turned off. It comes back on. Scuffling is heard, and again, a voice yells, "Get out of here!" The microphone is again turned off. When it's turned on again, it is clear the pilot is no longer in the cockpit. Someone is heard speaking in broken English, in what was described as an Arabic accent, telling passengers, quote, "There is a bomb on board. This is the captain speaking. Remain in your seat. There is a bomb on board. Stay quiet. We are meeting their demands. We are returning to the airport." While this was going on in the cockpit, we have information about what was happening in the cabin. One passenger, 31-year-old Jeremy Glick, was flying with his 2-month-old child. He called home from the doomed plane. He said the passengers were herded to the rear of the plane by a trio of hijackers, armed with knives and a red box they say contained a bomb. When Glick's family confirmed for him what another passenger heard, that a plane had already struck the World Trade Center, Glick dropped the phone, then returned to tell his family the male passengers had taken a vote to attack the hijackers. Glick wasn't heard from again. The plane held 38 passengers and a crew of 8. Kelly Arena, CNN, Washington.
Among the businesses in the World Trade Center's Twin Towers, there were 31 countries represented, and one of them, Britain, is expecting the number of its casualties to keep rising. The word we have now from British Foreign Secretary Jack Straw is that the number of dead is approaching 100. Earlier, a spokesman for British Prime Minister Tony Blair said it could go into the hundreds. The Prime Minister has recalled Parliament from its summer recess.
President Bush has vowed to punish those responsible and says America will be victorious in what he calls a battle of good versus evil, and he's getting backing at home and abroad. Both houses of Congress have approved unanimously a resolution vowing retaliation against those found responsible. Our senior White House correspondent John King reports.
The president got his first look at the devastation as planning for a possible military response intensified. The White House is asking Congress to pass a resolution authorizing the use of force to retaliate for the deadly terrorist attacks and making a major diplomatic push seeking international support as well. Mr. Bush called the leaders of Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Russia, and China and welcomed a NATO statement calling the attacks on the United States tantamount to a strike against the alliance.
We will rally the world. We will be patient. We'll be focused. And we will be steadfast in our determination. This battle will take time and resolve. But make no mistake about it, we will win.
Mr. Bush met twice with his national security team, and sources tell CNN the discussions included talk of potential military responses and an update on the fast-developing investigation. In the words of one senior official familiar with the evidence, quote, "Everything points to the terrorist network of Osama bin Laden."
This enemy hides in shadows and has no regard for human life. This is an enemy who preys on innocent and unsuspecting people, then runs for cover. But it won't be able to run for cover forever.
The Bush team also responded to questions about why it took the president so long to return to Washington after the attacks. The administration said it had credible and reliable information that the jet that barreled into the Pentagon was initially heading toward the White House. And it said there was reason to believe Air Force One also was a target. And that is why Mr. Bush stopped at 2 military bases on a 9-hour trip back to Washington from Florida and had fighter jet escorts on the final leg home.
The information that we had was real and credible about Air Force One. The manner in which Air Force One operated maintained the security of Air Force One at all times.
The president met with congressional leaders seeking quick agreement on an emergency spending bill.
And officials report progress in both sets of talks. One aimed at authorizing $20 billion for the recovery and early investigative efforts, the other backing the use of force to retaliate for terrorist strikes Mr. Bush equates to acts of war. John King, CNN, the White House.
Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld apparently is trying to get U.S. forces ready for combat. In a taped message to America's soldiers, the defense chief said that much more will be expected of them in weeks and months to come. Mark Potter joins us now from the Pentagon with the latest there. Mark?
Well, good morning, Jonathan. There are a lot of activities on the part of the U.S. military right now, and some of them are being witnessed by the citizens of this country. There are a number of aspects that we can actually see with our own eyes. U.S. officials have dispatched a number of aircraft carriers and ships along the and warships along the east and west coast of this country, where they are in what is being described as a defensive posture. Now, on the East Coast, from the U.S. Atlantic Fleet in Norfolk, there are 2 carriers and 5 warships in place. According to the Navy, they are there to contribute to the air defense of Washington, D.C. and New York City. The carriers are the John F. Kennedy and the George Washington. Also activated, we just received this news, the USNS Comfort, a hospital ship based in Baltimore. It is sailing for New York and is expected to arrive there Friday. On the West Coast, another carrier, the USS John C. Stennis, deployed from San Diego. It and 14 other ships are patrolling along the West Coast and along Hawaii. Now, something that people may not be aware of right now, the U.S. military is in control of all airspace over the United States. Civilian planes are grounded, domestic and international planes grounded right now. The only planes in the sky belong to the U.S. military. And so citizens in a number of cities, including here in Washington and certainly in New York, have been seeing fighter jets flying overhead on combat air patrol. We are told that control is expected to return to the civilian agency, the Federal Aviation Administration, sometime later today. Now, here in Washington and New York, again, citizens have also watched the deployment of the National Guard. In this city, the capital city, we can see trucks along the roads. We can see Humvees parked at intersections, National Guard personnel standing watch on street corners. That's not something that the people here are used to seeing. This is unusual. And in New York City also, the National Guard is involved in the search and the rescue effort. Now, across the globe in the Persian Gulf area, there are 2 carrier battle groups in place right now. The USS Carl Vinson arrived on scene to replace the USS Enterprise group. But before the Enterprise could get and its group could get very far along, they only made it to the Arabian Sea. They were ordered to stop and to stay in position. So now both groups are in the general area. With those 2 groups there are some 30 warships in place supporting those 2 carriers, also about 150 aircraft. So a lot of activity on the part of the U.S. military, some far away, some close enough for citizens of this country to see. Back to you.
Mark Potter at the Pentagon. Thanks very much. Ralitza.
Pressure is mounting on the Taliban government of Afghanistan, which the United States has accused of sheltering Osama bin Laden. Nick Robertson joins us now via video phone from Kabul with the latest on the Afghan angle on the story. Nick.
For relief for this morning, 3 United Nations planes took off from Kabul airport bound for Pakistan. On board were 3 international diplomats, one from the United States, one from Australia, and one from Germany. They've been here helping, trying to secure the release of 8 international aid workers here on charges of trying to convert Muslims here to Christianity. They have left. Along with them, the last of all the international United Nations staff here. There were 80 in country in total. They are also gone. Along with them as well, many foreign overseas journalists who were working here. They also have gone. The International Committee for the Red Cross has begun pulling out its 30 international staff who are in this country. A reduction of all international and overseas staff by independent, non-governmental aid groups is also underway and expected to be completed later today. On the streets of Kabul, there is a growing apprehension and fear about what could be coming next. People here have been listening to the radio, the Taliban radio here, and on that radio station there have been reports about what's been going on in the United States. People on the streets here also, like their government, condemning the terrorism, offering their sympathies. but very concerned about the possibility that they could be involved in